Hi, my name's Rachel, and today we're talking about I say it with an F every time, Captive Prince by C.S. Pacat. This video was commissioned by my patron Andy. Thank you so much, Andy, for commissioning me.
Hello, it is I, Trash Can Rachel. I am so tired. Oh my god, I'm dying. And I'm here to say thank you for being a friend to my Therapy Bills patrons. And those are Allie, Amanda, Ashley, Carlin, Claire, Des, Emperor's New Blues, Eric, Harley, Jack and Jill, John E, Casey McKenzie, Kate B, Kelly K, Quinn, Lee, Lex, Molly, Lunar Stargazer, Mrs. Kittybug, Rain, SJ, Samar, Scarlett, Shiny, Sierra, Tori, and Zachary. Thank you all so much for being a friend.
So Captive Prince is a queer book series about Damon and Laurent. It started off as a web series that gained viral attention online. C.S. Pacat tried to publish it traditionally and got rejected after they had written the first 2 volumes. Eventually self-published, and then the books were selling like hotcakes, so Penguin picked it up. It originally was self-published in 2013, and then Penguin picked it up and republished it back in 2015. Published the sequel, Prince's Gambit, in July 2015, and then King's Rising, which is the 3rd and final part of the series, was released in February 2016. And this is about a guy named Damon who is the prince of one country, and then his mean half-brother takes over after their father dies and sells Damon, well, doesn't sell him, gives him away to the prince of an enemy country. It should have been a good book. The potential was here for C.S. Pacat to create a fantasy world, but instead she seems to have created a fake version of maybe Rome? I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because she didn't really put the time in to make that clear, which makes me ask, if you're not going to create these countries and make these countries have like very distinct differences in politics and make their histories clear and why they are at odds with each other clear and make these things plot relative for the reader, what was the purpose of them at all? Are they just vehicles to deliver something else to the reader? And if so, what? And the answer seems to be, judging by what's in the book, a plethora of sexual assault of enslaved persons, because that's really where we spend the most of our time. So I just feel like I read this and I just have so many questions about the choices that C.S. Pacat made. What was the point of making this a fantasy world but have no magic? It just feels, why does it just feel like an alternate version of maybe Rome, but not specific enough to actually be Rome? And why did you do all of this just to have a conversation on sexual slavery that was done very poorly? It doesn't feel like the author did much research to gain a good understanding of the political climate that she was actually trying to cultivate here. Not that I'm like some great history student. I obviously grew up fundy, so my history education is, but I feel like I should have seen more context as like that's important as to why these countries are the way that they are. Why is there war? What other resources other than sex slaves do each of these countries have? Who are the major players outside of the, 2 like dudes in charge? Like, who are the people below them who are important? Speaking of those dudes, the fact that we never see Damon's brother is ridiculous. I think the entire premise is kind of ridiculous, actually. Let's dive into this, shall we? He's not even guaranteed to know that giving Damon, who he hates just for being his half-brother, to an enemy prince will guarantee that Damon will be miserable. Assumedly, that's the outcome that he wants, right? He'll never actually know what happened to Damon. So how is that a more satisfying outcome than just killing him? This is a bad plan. And on top of this being a plot hole, wouldn't Damon, as a warrior for that country, wouldn't he know enemy secrets? Ways to attack, knowledge about resources, or spies, or weaknesses in the army, or whatever. Wouldn't he think, Damon might use those secrets to barter his way out of sexual slavery, defect, and come back to avenge me putting him into a position of sex slavery? Or just bartering his way to get free immediately? Like, logically, any sane ruler worth their salt would think those things through. Like, is this just supposed to be the stupidest revenge of all time? Or is C.S. Picot just that bad of a writer? Like, is the villain supposed to be stupid? Or was this just a plot hole? I'm genuinely asking. To me, what would have made more sense here is if he was maybe like, if maybe Damon was like sentenced to death, and the only way to sneak out was to like pretend to be a sex slave, and then he ends up in enemy country and plots to kill his brother while his brother is searching for him, like to hunt him down and kill him. That feels like more of a plot and higher stakes that actually make sense. Go with one enemy to save yourself from another. Your dad just died, you realize your brother's coming for your neck, you sneak out, the only way out is sex slavery. Pick your poison, so to speak. And then use the info he could glean from like court politicking to get back at his brother in smaller ways until he's finally able to leave and kill him and take back his throne. Again, instead of creating a fantasy world that is distinct with a plot that actually makes sense, she gives us a setup and then has an entire series of shocking scenes one after another that include rape and pedophilia. And the point of these scenes isn't to say these things are good, but I'm also not sure what the point is actually, other than to shock the reader, which I think is lazy at best, because she never did anything conversation-wise or thematically to justify having these scenes over and over, back to back to back to back. It's one shocking rape scene after another, or Damon being whipped, or Damon being cut down verbally by Laurent, and now Damon's also thinking about how sexy Laurent is despite how much he hates him, and then Damon getting forced to get a blowjob, which is an act of rape because he didn't want it. He's entered into a slave contest where the loser gets raped. He gets drugged by Laurent, who's the prince in charge of him, his master, so that he'll lose the contest and Laurent can watch Damon get raped. It just felt like we were trying to elicit certain feelings from the reader rather than have a conversation about anything, and I don't really like that. I feel like these are too sensitive of subjects to be doing that with. I also feel like the writing is not very good. It just seemed like she was in this, like similar to how The Night in Its Moon is, where it's like, let me open my thesaurus and just go through and pick out all of the words that sound fancy to me, and then the narrator adds to this because I feel like the narrator was going out of his way to make it sound fancier than it was. And I really struggled reading like the pedophilia stuff. Like there was no on page, like it's not like it was excused, but the way it was talked about, you really have to be so careful having conversations about child sexual assault and pedophilia, because that's a very delicate subject, and I just feel like C.S. Picot again just did this for shock and for no other reason. And what's the point? Like, yes, it is shocking and despicable, and Laurent, the prince that Damon is the sex slave of, Laurent's brother was killed by Damon, so Damon can't tell Laurent that who he is for fear of getting killed, but he's always in danger of getting killed or raped anyway. Laurent's not really in charge, his uncle is, and there's like a power dynamic between the two of them, and all we really get, all the players in this book are just Laurent, Damon, and people who work for Laurent who are all sort of blend together, and the uncle. It's a very small cast, right? So then when Laurent has a attempt made on his life, gee, I wonder who it could be. I can't really tell you to read this for plot because where was the plot? And I can't really tell you to read it for the politicking because again, there really isn't any, since there's only 4 men, one of which we never see, one who's enslaved and stripped of all power, and then 2 who are trying to take over their country, or are fighting each other essentially, like passive aggressively for control of their country. So again, it's like laughable that we even had the question of who could be trying to kill Laurent. Who else would it have been other than his uncle? There were no other players. There's even this line, I'll read it to you. Laurent's like, it's my uncle that's trying to kill me. But if that's true, Damon began, it was true. It was somehow not even a surprise. More like a truth that had grown for some time on the edge of his awareness, now brought into sharp relief. It was somehow not even a surprise. Somehow? It's blatantly not a surprise. It was pretty obvious. There could be nobody else. And that's what happens when you write a book and you don't actually have the intention of writing a book that's about the politicking. So when you have have Damon think that. Like, it's so laughable. It feels so shallow. So I can't tell you to read this for the plot or the politics. I can't tell you to read this for the exploration of themes, because there is no exploration. There is no conversation. There is just action, and there is no discussion of what those actions mean. I can't tell you to read this for the romance, because there is no romance. The romance comes later. And yeah, Laurent is a piece of shit, and I'm sure C.S. Picot does, you know, the work of trying to redeem him, and some people eat that shit up, but like, I don't care, because there's no plot, and I'm not going to read for like a potential of a romance being later, hoping that that's well done, because I already don't care about this nonsensical, non-existent plot. I can't tell you to read this because it's in a genre you might like, because I can't even say definitively what genre this is. It's not historical fiction, but it's also not fantasy, but it's also definitely not a romance. And it's also not some like new genre bending thing that I could recommend. I know that people say you have to continue with the series for the romance, the character motivations, etc., but a book, I believe, should stand on its own. So no matter what's in book 2 or 3, it's not going to retroactively make this book better. I don't review series as a whole, I review each book on its individual merits, and this one just does not stand on its own. There have been cases where I've been in a position where I give a first book in a series 1 star and then I go on to like the further books, but that does not mean that I go back and change my rating of the first book. I have to rate this book for what this book did, and I cannot give this more than 1.5 stars. I can't really give you any reason to read this. What I can do is give you a rec for a series I think is historical yet also sort of fantasy. It's historical fiction fantasy. There's no magic in it though. About people doing bad shit and politicking, and actual world building is present, and there's a romance. And it's And I Darken by Kirsten White. Our main character, Lotta, is Vlad the Impaler, but a gender bent version, so it's Lotta, she's a girl, she is Vlad the Impaler, but you see her as a young girl until the time she becomes like the version of Vlad the Impaler that this series has, right? Her father abandons her and her brother Radu. They end up living in enemy territory in the Ottoman courts with, you know, the nobles, and Lotta knows that being ruthless is the only way to survive. She and Radu end up being used as like pawns in political games because she is the heir to Wallachia. Lotta hates the Ottomans, but Radu, her brother, comes to love the Ottomans, and she just wants to grow up and take her revenge. Then they meet Mehmed, the son of the Sultan, and both of them become extremely close with him. But he is the heir to the empire that Lotta hates, and you see what happens to them in this triangle where they are all very close, and they are all sort of in love. Both of Radu and Lotta are both in love with Mehmed, and it's a story about love and loyalty and politics and war and scheming and revenge, and it's everything that I would have wanted to see in Captive Prince, but it's just not present in Captive Prince. So if you were disappointed by Captive Prince, I highly, highly, highly recommend And I Darken by Kirsten White. I think that in every way it did what I was hoping Captive Prince would do, so much better. So let me know down below if you've read Captive Prince, specifically if you've read all 3 of the pieces of this trilogy. If you have like complicated feelings, like what your feelings are on book 1 versus the rest of the series, let me know. I'm very interested. And like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye. Before I go, I have to say thank you for being a friend to my Potato Starch Marxist patrons, and those are AM Angel, Abby, Aiden, Alexander, Alicia, Allison, Amanda B, Amanda D, Andy, Angelica, Anita, Artie the Ninth, Ava, BB, Blythe, Ray, Caitlin, Carlin, Catherine, Kathy, Cheyenne, Chris, CJ, Corwin, Corey, Darren, Deandra, Deborah, Diet Goth, Dorian, Douglas, Ebby, Eden, Elise, Elia, Ember, Emily, Ava, Faith, Grace, Gracie, Haley, Hannah C, Hannah T, Horror Goose, Ilianaka, India Inks, JT, Jen, Jen with 2 N's, Jenny, Jillian, Joni, Jules, Kaylee, Kate, Catherine, Katya, Keely, Kelsey, Kylie, Laura, Lauren B, Library of Scars, Liz Cardigan, Luna Moth, Lustful Octopus, Martin, Maddie, Marcella, Marquita, Malara, Miri, Miriam, Moog, Morgan R, Moth, Mr. Draws, MXDS, James, Nat, Never, Nicole R, Nicole T, Nikki, 9binary, Paige E, Paige P, Peggy Lou, Pixel Stars, Puratheon, Pocket, Quill, Rachel B, Rachel S, Rachel, who's my friend on Twitter, Rat, Sarah, Reba, Ren, Robin, Rowan, Samantha, Sarah, Scarlett, Shanae, Shannon, Shayna, Sheena K, Sean, Stephanie, Steven, Talia, Tiana, Sev, Ursula, Valentine, Writer A, and Yesenia. Thank you all so much for being a friend.